Hi, welcome to the next episode of the 5% Club podcast with me, your host, Bryan Mansell. I am honoured to be joined this morning by Shaun Adams, who is the superior agency agent in the country, the head of Cooper Adams Estate Agents in the south of England. Morning, Shaun. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Morning.
Good. So Shaun has very kindly given up his time, as some of our agents do, his very busy schedule, to just share with you his thoughts on Gazeal, warts and all, and about how his agency has successfully introduced it to a lot of his customers over what's the number of years now, Shaun, you've been working with us, isn't it? I think so.
Five.
Wow, 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 wow. Okay. Less for armed robbery, as they say, but hugely successful. We absolutely love Shaun. So I'm just going to get started. Open conversation, no scripts, no rehearsals. We're just going to get into this and have an honest conversation. So, Shaun, do you want to just sort of go through very quickly Cooper Adams, where you are in the world, and that sort of background?
Yeah, certainly. So I started in state agency in April 1991.
Wow.
So quite a few years ago, and things you say things have changed a lot in agency, or will do, but the fundamentals are still there,
Yeah.
and the system hasn't really changed as far as the basics in all those years.
Yeah.
And even back then, we were still waiting for e-conveyancing to start, and we were promised that
Yeah.
we started in the next 5 years. That was back in the 90s,
Yeah.
and still nothing's happened. But
Still
yeah,
waiting.
yeah. So I worked for a company locally for about 15 years, and then I set up on my own with a business partner in 2004, and we started one office, and we're now at three offices. The business partner, he asked me to buy him out because he said he was fed up with me asking him to work harder, so he said buy me out. um, and but yeah, so that's in the past now. And yeah, I think after after that happened, I started to invest more into training and looking to improve myself and the business, because I thought it was pretty broken, really.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that changed was I went to Australia with Stephen Brown, and we
Yeah.
looked at the way that they do agency there, and it's miles ahead. And I thought I'd love that. Now,
Yeah.
we could wait for the UK to change, or we could start to make those changes ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's when I think I met you guys
Yeah.
at a conference 5 years ago. And what you offered was more along the lines of this strategy model: upfront information and a commitment at the time of agreeing the offer.
Yeah.
And that was music to my ears. But it was a journey, though, to start with.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy.
But nothing good ever is, though, is it? That's the kind of the point. It's almost like if it isn't easy, it means more down the line because you
Yeah,
master it and you persevere. And too many people in all walks of life, not just what we're talking about, tend to give up quite quickly. You
yeah,
know, but actually, those of us that persevere behind an idea, and the world is littered with stories of perseverance as being one of the critical things to get change to happen. And my God, you have been, you know, like me, persevering through the doubters, and that won't work. This isn't going to work. And you keep going and you keep going because you believe that it's right. And that's the key, isn't it? The perseverance.
definitely, definitely. If I believe something's right, and I know that it works for us as a business, but primarily the people that are trying to move, um, then it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And if I get passionate about that, then I need to not convince my team, but to explain it to my team for them to be totally on board.
Yeah.
And it helps, though, that I'm stubborn, and when I get the bit between my teeth, I won't give up on it.
Yeah.
And that means you have to wade through treacle to start with. It's a steep learning curve, but you start to reap the rewards.
Yeah.
And there's still, even now with our Gazeal offering, there are still things that is difficult, but we know in the long term it's exactly the right thing for everyone, and it works.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to hear. And certainly from my point of view, and I guess I'm not alone in this, is that for you to think that you're going to launch something and it's going to be perfect on day one is way too arrogant, because no one knows anything, especially when it's something new that's not really been done before. And we've had, history tells us so many times of, I got asked a lot of the time, have you done any market research in this? And my attitude was very much like, well, market research is good for certain things, but sometimes people don't know what they need until you show it to them. And we still hear to this day, oh, I haven't heard of this before. We didn't know this was a thing. This is not the normal thing. No, it's becoming the normal thing. But actually, when you think about it, whether it's not been done before and now it is irrelevant. It's, would you as an individual like to use it or not? It's not up to whether it's something you've not heard from, or your mum hasn't heard about it, or your solicitor or somebody. That's largely irrelevant. It's, what do you think? And it's your decision as a buyer or a seller whether you want to make a commitment or not. And that's nobody else's decision, irrespective of whether it's been there or not.
Yeah, yeah. And until it becomes the norm. So I expect at the start, when they bought their cars years ago, when cars first came out 100 years ago or whatever, and probably insurance was optional.
Yeah.
Um, and probably some people took it and other people didn't. I don't know when that started. And now it's mandatory, so everyone takes car insurance whether they like it or not. And we know it makes a better world because everyone's insured.
Yeah.
But home insurance isn't optional. But now people realise that it is a wise thing to make sure you're covered for if something goes wrong. And most people do it. The people that don't do it, if something goes wrong, they regret not doing it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I liken it to that. But it takes quite a lot of momentum. It's like in a lot of things, it's the early adopters and the people then that see other people doing it and see the results they get from it,
Yeah.
and that peace of mind. And like anything, you take a risk, don't you?
Yeah.
If whatever you want to do in life.
I think the beautiful thing about this, certainly when I came up, when we started putting Gazeal together, was that from a risk point of view, the only risk is on me, really, because um, I'm risking my career and everything on my belief, which took me a very long time to get the confidence to do that. To be honest, I played it safe through corporate estate agency and everything else for most of my life. So my children had an upbringing that they was comfortable, and so on. And it wasn't until, my late 40s that I thought I had an idea that I want, based on my experiences, that I thought, if I don't scratch this itch now, I'm never going to do it. And someone needs to do it. I was looking for a solution like this. I couldn't find it. So I thought, well, actually, why don't you do something about it if it means that much? But also, interestingly, you use car insurance as a very interesting analogy there, because I totally agree with you. People who insure cars go, well, why has my premium gone up? I'm a really good driver. And as I've just said to my 19-year-old who's learning to drive at the moment, you're not driving for yourself, you're driving for everybody else. Yeah. You might be the best driver going, but the rest of the public aren't. So
Yeah,
you're insuring yourself because in case they hit you,
yeah.
rather than you hitting them.
You're defending yourself,
You're
aren't you?
defending yourself. And I think that's the analogy for me is very similar to the house buying and selling process. You might believe you're the best buyer or the most motivated seller, but it's your move is going to be dependent on lots of other people. So,
Yeah, yeah.
it's
And keeping with that analogy, imagine if every time you drove your car, there was a 25 to 30% risk of you
yeah.
having an accident, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Now, imagine that.
Yeah.
Now, they would be, well, one, they'd be scared to drive their car.
Yeah.
Two, they'd be make sure they're insured up to the hill and their car is covered with rubber beach balls to stop
Yeah.
accidents and
Bubble
that.
wrap. Yeah.
But yeah, and I think that people are accepting, or I don't know, maybe they think it would never happen to them. That
Yeah.
when they sell the house and when they want to buy another one, it's all going to move smoothly.
Yeah.
And yeah, they just don't ever think it's going to happen to them. And I think, and that's one of the barriers, and that's one of the things that we get when we talk about reservation agreements, that people never think it's going to happen to them. And maybe they'd moved, twice before and it hasn't happened to them, and they'd be thinking they're okay. But yeah, if it goes wrong, then it can go wrong badly, can't it?
What do you so just talk to, because a lot of people listening to this will be agents that are thinking about, looking at reservations and that sort of process, or talking about Gazeal or whatever it might be. What's your, talk to us about how you use the service? How do you actually roll it out to sellers and so on and so on?
Okay. So that was a steep learning curve for us.
Yeah.
And at the start of onboarding with you guys, we relied on you very, very heavily for everything because we felt uncomfortable trying to answer questions and be confident about something that we didn't know.
Yeah.
And I think right at the start, you said to me, Shaun, at any time, revert back to us. You don't know about our business and what we do, and we're not expected to know exactly what you do. So bounce it back to us all the time. And we did that, but it did mean that it made it more difficult when we were sitting down in people's sitting rooms
Yeah.
and speaking to them about the process, because it's not like you're next to us and you could
Yeah.
explain it. We would have to say to them, well, we could certainly put you in touch with the guys at Gazeal, who know their stuff, and sometimes that's tricky.
Yeah.
But obviously, as the weeks and months and years went by, we learnt exactly what you were saying to them, so we were confident, and we'd had experience of things that had gone wrong and right, and then it just made us feel much more confident that we could explain it properly and put people's minds at rest. I
Yeah.
can't remember what the original question
Well, it
was
was
now.
about how you use the service, and
Yeah, yeah,
your what's very interesting about Cooper Adams and how you've worked with Gazeal, because your attitude towards the service has not changed in any way, which is it's 50-50, right? Your belief system is
yeah,
that it should be an equal split between people.
yeah. We've tried other ways and we've given people the option, but that is the easiest one for us and sits well with us.
Yeah.
Um, some of the mistakes we made at the start was speaking to them in general about the reservation agreement, leaving it till quite late,
Yeah.
agreeing the sale, telling both sides it's all agreed, and then speaking about the reservation agreement.
Yeah.
By that stage, they said, I don't know if I want to do it now. I've
Yeah.
agreed the sale. You've taken it off the market. So we were struggling with that. So
Yeah.
we thought we've got to change what we put into practice
Yeah.
to make sure that everyone's aware of it right at the start. Um, so when we go and see the seller in their own home and appraise their property, we mention that we offer this. We don't go too overboard on it because we don't want to confuse them too much with too many things to worry about.
Yeah.
Some of the people ask us about it and we explain it. Others say, okay, well, that sounds really interesting. We can talk about that at a later stage. So it's gently at the start.
Yeah.
Then when they're happy to appoint us to sell their home on our marketing agreement, it does talk a little bit more in detail and it asks them, are they do they want to do a reservation agreement, or are they happy that they could lose their buyer on a whim, quite close to exchange? So obviously, most of them want to do that.
Yeah.
And we know right from the start, then we can put it in our description and our adverts, and we can explain it on our viewings that this is what the seller wants, a reservation agreement.
Yeah.
Um, we then explain it to the people at the viewing, this and how it works and that sort of thing. They're happy with that. Some have got their reservations. Maybe I shouldn't use that word. Some have got their worries. Um, and but then we have if they're thinking about making an offer, we have an offer form, an online offer form, and on that form it explains in detail about the reservation agreement, and it asks them the question: are they happy to enter a reservation agreement? Yes or no. Now, as we've had in the past, we've sometimes had multiple offers on a property.
Yeah.
Some of the people that tick no, they don't want to do a reservation agreement, even if their offer is slightly higher. A lot of times the owners will say, do I want to sell to someone that's not going to make a commitment?
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah.
Most people say yes. They can see that it protects the buyer, it protects the seller as well, but it stops the seller messing around on price, selling to someone else. It stops a lot of that. So we know right at the start they've made their offer, they're happy to do a reservation agreement. The seller wants it as well. We then would negotiate the offer, but we would never ever formally agree on that sale until both sides have done their reservation agreement.
Yeah. Good.
And it can be done in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's emailed out to the seller. They can sign it, pay for it, done in 10 minutes, then emailed out to the buyer. It could all be done within half an hour. It can be really fast.
Yeah.
We don't need these barriers. And quite often we don't, because as we're confident and the systems are all there and working perfectly, we don't need to engage with you guys to say, can you do this, that, or the other, because
Sure.
it's all set up.
Yeah, and you've
But
really evolved into that, haven't you? That's what in my naivety, when I first started Gazeal, it was the agent's going to want to do this themselves. They don't want to have to speak to another group of people and, as well as mortgage advisors and conveyancers. We don't want to be an unnecessary middleman. That was written up on our whiteboard when we had offices all those years ago, pre-COVID, when we brought this out across the whole office. We must not be the middleman, the unnecessary, mustn't slow things down. We've got to make sure that we're nimble and we're agile. And the model originally was, the agent will be able to do this and they'll be able to issue it off their phone outside the property and so on. But just like you said, what we came to realize, which is like any business when it launches, especially something new, you don't know what's going to happen until you actually get it out there, and then you get your first punch on the nose, and then you learn how to how to change. Was that we didn't realize our involvement would be required so much, but actually now we insist on it, because actually all we want our agents, especially those new ones that are joining us, to do is, hey, look, we can stop your buyer from pulling out and get you compensated. How does that sound? Oh my God, that's great. How does it work? We'll get my colleague to give you a ring, because you don't need to do it right now. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about other things, and then we'll come back to that, and my colleagues will give you a ring and run through it. And here's some material if you want to, read up on it in the meantime. And that just seems to have, enabled a lot more estate agents across the country to who are not, with all honesty, Shaun, they're not like you. They don't have you say stubbornness, I say, perseverance and dogged determination to do the right thing. It's a very different attitude there. But a lot of people don't have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another mistake that we made was, as we were leaving it till after the sale was agreed, we were
Yeah.
doing sales memos and that sort of thing. Then we were bringing up the reservation agreement, and then a lot of people were saying, "Oh, okay, I'll run this past my solicitor."
Yeah.
A lot of solicitors didn't have the time or the inclination to read through this, and they would just bat it away and say, "We don't really deal with these before, don't sign it, move on." So we soon learned that involving their solicitor wasn't the right thing. I emailed and asked 15 local solicitors to come and meet with me for coffee and explain what we were doing and about the upfront information as well. Only one of them replied and said, "I'll have a chat with you." That sums it up really.
Yeah.
And I know that solicitors are very busy and they've got their own job to do, making sure that their buyer or seller, their buyer is buying the right property, it's all legally correct, and their seller is answering the right questions and that sort of thing. I get that, I understand that. So for us introducing it very early on, after the viewing, at the same time as the offer, um, the solicitors weren't really getting involved. We let the solicitors know what's happening, and now a lot of them are ready for it. They understand it, and they know that they don't really get involved with
Yeah.
what their client is offering or what their client offer accepting. That's up to their clients.
Yeah.
So they accept that now, and that works fine.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen a major shift in that. There's still, like you say, there's still, we still come up against the odd firm here and there that, like you say, are overworked and just say, no, 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 we can't deal with this. And they use a variety of excuses. We had a situation yesterday that was very unfortunate, because the buyer, who was very, very keen on the property, was very nervous about losing it, appointed a lawyer, a conveyancer, who immediately said, don't sign anything. And they said, well, we want to do this, but we'd like you just have a look and give your advice. No, we can't advise on that. We can't do that. And while they procrastinated, the seller sold it to somebody else. And the buyers were truly, truly devastated, because A, their conveyancer didn't give them any time to help them, and secondly, just gave them really poor advice. So unsurprisingly, they've disinstructed that firm, and they're going to use a different firm that the agents now recommended, which they didn't do originally. And I think it's a shame, but the industry has come away from, or I see it coming out of, the days of the 80s and 90s when we were in it, where the attitude of the public towards estate agents was quite negative. What do you got, like, guys, the old white sock brigade? What do you do really, other than take our money and do very little else? There's a lot more respect for the industry now, and the public have begun to realise that we're not trying to rip anybody off in the estate agency services we offer, mortgage advice, conveyancing advice. We are trying to give people advice so they can get a much rounded view of what options they have, depending on their own circumstances that they might want to use to help them buy this property. Because, as you said at the very beginning, it's an awful system that no one likes, that nobody likes at all. What advice would you give to an estate agent that has joined Gazeal and not really doing much with it, or an agent thinking about Gazeal? What advice would you give them?
So I would definitely copy if they want to copy what we do, as far as mention it at the appraisal, making sure that their seller is on board with it when they're launching to market, making sure that they're speaking about it on the viewings, and making sure it's all in place at the same time as when offers come in. And do not say your offer's been accepted until they've signed the agreement.
Yeah.
By doing all that, it's just changed completely, and that's why we have got just under 90% of our sales with reservation agreements on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that means
Tremendous.
that our fall through rate, it used to be getting on for 30%, and now it's below 10%. Um, we would like the more agents that use it, the more whole chains are protected.
Yeah.
So that fall through rate will come down even further once everyone else is in the chain is protected. Um, Also, the conveyancers and the solicitors that you use on a regular basis,
Yeah.
explain it to them, make sure they're 100% happy with it, and then keep recommending those solicitors. But most of the world, most of the countries in the world have some sort of commitment when an offer is accepted, a
Yeah.
reservation
Yeah, they
agreement,
do.
one
You're
form or
absolutely. Yeah, I think
another.
we're the only ones that don't, aren't we? I think.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know many that do. We explain that to people that it's pretty normal around the world, and I'm sure that one day it will be mandatory in this country. I'm sure it will.
I hope so. Although saying that, hot off the press, we met with the government yesterday, um, and they are big fans. Well, the minister, well, the civil servants that we were talking to for the Minister of Housing are very, very keen on reservations, on looking at ways in which this can happen. However, the can has been kicked down the road quite a long way because their focus is on the digitization of data, of getting data correct and uniformed across all the local authorities, which I don't think is a bad thing.
No, no,
But
but
it
it should
feels
be done
like,
in tandem.
yeah, it should be, but they're starting very, very late. The government are meeting with us again in a couple of weeks' time because what we have asked them to do, that they certainly gave the indication they'd be prepared to, is to provide an update to the SRA, the Law Society, and various things to say, actually, look, these things should not be frowned upon. They shouldn't be just dismissed immediately. You should take the time for your customers' best interests to actually have a look at these things and consider the different options that exist, bearing in mind reservations are not new, right? I mean, they're used in auction, they're used in new homes,
Yeah, yeah.
mandatory
Oh, yeah.
in both of those two disciplines. So you've got conveyancers dealing with a new property or dealing with an auction property that they would still act on, who do use those things. So that, and this is the point we were making to government yesterday, for them then to say, well, we won't do it in the private treaty sector is a little bit crazy, because the private treaty sector is the one that you are trying to improve, because the other two don't have very big fall through issues. So you'd think it'd be the opposite, wouldn't you? You think the conveyancers in a marketplace where they have 30%, fall through rates, abortive rates, that's the priority, not the other ones that they have. But
Yeah.
I guess they don't just yet. So, but it's on
No.
the radar. It's coming, but it's down the line. Digitization is first of data, which I think is right. But if they can help us, at least convince the naysayers that this is a thing that shouldn't be just brushed away, that'll be a big step forward.
Yeah. Well, I think that by the time the government get round to mandating it, that there'd be so many agents that are using them
Yeah,
anyway
yeah,
that
practical will
it will
be right.
make it easier. So yeah.
Fantastic. Sean, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this, to your fellow agents across the
No,
country?
not really. I mean, as I said before, if anyone wants to reach out, we've got a sheet on how we do it, and I'm quite happy to share that with you, Brian, to share
Yeah.
with others
Thank you,
on
Sean.
the way that we've gradually evolved and improved in the 5 years that we were doing it. We admit that when we first started doing it, we probably had less than 10% of our sales with reservation agreements on. Um, the team struggled. They weren't confident. They were. Sometimes it's easier just to get that instruction on and get that sale done and not worry about the reservation agreements, because they are an extra thing that we have to do.
Yeah.
But they now can see due to the extremely low fall through rate, that they're a no brainer.
Yeah.
And whenever as we when we started doing this, the whole company was learning. But now, if somebody new that starts with us, and it also makes it more attractive for new staff members to join, because they've heard that we use them, and they would like to be in a system where we do all our hard work, and there's a strong chance that we get paid for doing that.
It's a
And it
good point. Very good point.
makes us feel better.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's ethically right, it's financially and commercially right, and also we don't get upset so much because we don't have having to ring up the person to say your buyer has pulled out.
Yeah.
Why have they pulled out? Oh, they didn't really want to tell me, and we try to get it out of them, and we don't know whether it's a family breakup or something like this, whatever. Some of the negative things that I've had from people that have commented online, they are commenting because they feel that it's not fair that the buyer should be allowed to pull out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of the reasons, the fair reasons, are covered in the agreement.
Yeah.
If there's something major on the survey, if there's a bad title, if they've tried 2 lenders and they can't get the mortgage, they are allowed to pull out and walk away from it. So it's completely fair and ethical. But the reasons because next door's just come on the market £1,000 cheaper, and any other reasons like this, or the surveys come up that there's some flaking paint on the windowsills, all those stupid reasons, they're ruled out. And when people start to make those noises that I'm thinking, we remind them, don't forget Unires. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
And we've had people in the past say, this is taking too long. I'm pulling out. I've had enough of it. And I've reminded them, don't forget Unires. Oh yeah, okay, we'll leave it for now. And then a week later, it's exchanged contracts.
Yeah.
So even with, and another thing is that some people said, if they've only got to pay £2,000 and they're allowed to pull out, is that enough when they're buying a 500 grand home? Even when you're buying 500 grand home, even if you're buying £1 million home, you still don't want to lose £2,000.
No.
So sometimes it's just the fact that you've signed a legal agreement, you've shown some commitment, you don't want to lose any money. Those are the reasons why it's going to keep you there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it definitely works.
Absolutely. Shaun, you're a legend. And you always will be in my book. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and you.
Really, really appreciate it. We'll sign off and I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.